Domestic violence is a major issue for Australian society. How can studying gender help us understand the origins of the problem and conceptualize solutions? When focusing on education and students, is there a link between school bullying and the future occurrence of domestic violence? To answer these questions, we must firstly look at gender. So what does a boy actually look like? What does a boy wear? Most people will say that a boy wears shorts and a t-shirt, usually with some sort of logo or movie character on it, something like Batman or Spider-Man maybe. What do boys do? Most people would also say that boys like spending their time running around after a ball or playing video games. Boys grow up playing outside, building things, playing in the dirt, or riding their bikes around the streets. What about a boy's favourite colour? Is it blue? Could it be pink or purple? Who made these rules to say what boys should and shouldn't like? How should boys act? Oh, that's right. They should be strong and manly. What does that even mean? Oh, boys aren't allowed to cry. They work hard and take control of situations, learning leadership skills and how to take care of the girls, ensuring they can be the man of the house one day. Boys are also considered lazy and messy with little motivation in life. But what about education? The stereotypic view is that boys will go on to work in science, engineering, and other technical fields. Do these stereotypes contribute to the masculinity of our boys and how they behave towards others for the rest of their lives? If gender is influenced by social interactions, aren't we all responsible for perpetuating these stereotypes? So what is gender? There is a difference between a person's sex and gender. Sex is a biological term referring to the genitalia of a person, either male or female, whereas gender is a socially constructed view of oneself. Although biological determinism argues that men and women are fundamentally wired differently, this is not true. Biological determinism does not determine our skills, behaviours, interests, needs, or desires. This is also linked to essentialism. There are inevitable characteristics that are fixed and make us who we are. A person's gender is something that is developed over time. There is no little box that each of us fit into. It's our individuality that makes us who we are, and as such should be celebrated. Martin and Rubble described the development of a person's gender emerging as early as 10 months old. Although primitive, infants can distinguish between female and male faces and voices, forming initial stereotypes of each gender. As toddlers, children learn about defined characteristics, which are socialised aspects of gender. Between 5 and 7 years of age, their identity is consolidated and becomes more fixed. However, when children pass through this rigid phase, they will become more flexible and start to develop more individual differences. With children developing stereotypical views of gender at such a young age, it is important to understand how this happens and society's role in this. The post-structural perspective on gender celebrates gender as being a personal negotiation that is changing all the time. This means that our gender is not something that is biologically determined, it is manipulated by social expectations on behaviour and choices. Gender socialisation simply means that boys and girls are taught what behaviours are thought to be acceptable for their gender. These expectations are evident through the way boys and girls are spoken to from birth. Boys will be spoken to in a way that develops their masculinity, whereas girls are treated in a way that develops femininity. As they grow, the socialisation process intensifies, becoming highly influenced by family members, friends, media, and the education system. The people in our lives help to shape our gender unknowingly. From the very beginning, we are listening and taking in everything that we see. Boys are taught to be tough, to be protective, and defend themselves. When boys fall over, they are told to suck it up and to be strong. Only girls cry from a grazed knee. Playing with trucks, bricks, and violent video games introduces them to aggressive and violent behaviours. Even when it comes to chores as boys get older, they are not taught how to clean and cook. They are told to take the rubbish out or to mow the lawns. Men get the dirty jobs or anything that requires muscle. Boys see their fathers go to work and provide for the family. It is all these statements, behaviours and roles children see that continue the stereotypes and the expectations on genders. Our boys are growing up to believe that being masculine means to be tough, aggressive, and powerful. At school, boys are playing football and jumping or climbing on playgrounds. Boys are acting tough and trying to be cool, as that's what society has shown them is how to act as a boy. With less emphasis on caring and nurturing others, boys are losing their femininity and are more likely to be lost in a stereotypical minefield of masculinity. The expectations society puts on children to behave a certain way has become increasingly worrying, with social media being such a powerful platform today. Many schools are now using digital devices in their classrooms, utilising software that allows students to communicate between peers, teachers, and the wider community when completing tasks. Technology may be the way of the future, but how it affects gender development is a concern, as 82% of teens in 2015 were heavy users of social media. Children today use mobile devices to take selfies and present themselves on social media how they want to be perceived, or how they think they should be according to their gender socialization. With the media constantly manipulating this process by perpetuating the stereotypes of gender, it is impossible for children to not develop a distorted view of gender and the biases that biological determination has clouded society with. It is easy to conceptualize the link between gender socialization and bullying in our school and future occurrence of domestic violence. With boys in particular being taught to be tough and strong, it is reasonable to think that their gender development would play a role in the level of aggression and violence that they display. The characteristics of domestic violence and bullying are clearly illustrated as the same thing in the table. With so many students experiencing bullying in school, it is clear there is a correlation between the two. It is not far-fetched to describe our children as domestically violent to their peers and within their friendships. The important question society needs to ask is, why are our children displaying such behaviour and why do they think it is acceptable? These behaviours are learnt from an early stage in life. Exposure at home will lead to continued perpetuation of the violence to the outside of the home. Children may be bullied by parents or siblings, leading to long-term psychological effects and a higher likelihood of repeating the behaviour. Their behaviour becomes normalised and they are unable to see any wrong with it. In Australian schools, 1 in 6 students aged 7 to 17 reported being bullied at least once a week. With more primary students than secondary students experiencing this, there is an alarming amount of young people displaying physical abuse, name-calling, and socially excluding their peers. Studies show that bullies will display controlling behaviour and have usually been the subject of abuse themselves, further linking the theory of gender socialisation and the evidence of learnt behaviour. Although there are numerous reasons why students may bully, the most common are a lack of positive attention at home, racial discrimination, insecurity, and the need to feel in control. A survey from across 4 states showed that 80% of non-Anglo students were bullied at some point throughout their schooling. It is clear that children who are bullied are because they do not fit into the mould that society has designed for them. When other students see their gender as incorrect, they reject them. When women began to say no, the domestic violence movement forced the issue into public eye. This is not an individual problem, it is a social one that has been reinforced by culture for decades. The idea that this behaviour is acceptable within relationships and that women only have themselves to blame was challenged. The civil rights and anti-war movements in 1950 and 1960s challenged the contrary and fed the feminist movement, supporting women in the 1970s publicising the issue. Today, this issue still affects many Australians, with 1 in 4 children being exposed to domestic violence, with an average of 1 woman being killed every week from domestic violent attacks. It's important to understand what it is and how it affects gender identity. A popular myth is that domestic violence doesn't affect the kids. This is false, as it affects their confidence, self-esteem, education, views on gender roles, and future relationships. Exposure to this behaviour will lead children to believe it is the norm in relationships of any type and can lead into their adult intimate relationships too. It's time to throw out the stereotypes of boys and be open to gender identity as an individual growth experience that cannot be boxed and packaged up like a factory-made Barbie doll. As educators, it is important to recognise that children learn fundamental life skills by observing those around them, in particular their parents. As children spend a substantial amount of time with their teachers, it is essential that the observations they are making are of positive relationships, fostering desirable behaviours. This is also known as the post-structural perspective on gender. As previously mentioned, schools play a vital role in the development of students' gender, in particular masculinity. Schools play a role in the way masculinity is understood and what it means to be a boy today. With research showing that boys are more likely to appear in court later on in life, it is reasonable to propose that gender development impacts the occurrence of bullying and domestic violence. Educators should be promoting less stereotypical conceptions of what it means to be a boy and encouraging a more transformative, flexible view of gender. Although we want to encourage bravery and resilience, it may mean that boys believe they need to be tough and defend themselves, leading to violence and bullying within our schools. So what can we do? As educators, it is essential that a clear understanding of gender and how it develops is maintained. Understanding how physical and verbal actions can impact a student's gender development would ensure a more positive influence on the student. The National Safe Schools Framework aims to help support student well-being and learning at school. The framework acknowledges the rights and responsibilities of all parties in developing a safe whole school community. Most importantly, this document fosters respectful, caring, and positive relationships between teachers, students, and peers, with a focus on safety and well-being. Further research and reading on the framework is advantageous for all educators. As gender is an ongoing process that is ever-changing, educators too need to work on their self-assessment and pull away from the gender stereotypes. Additionally, anti-bullying programs and better education on what is acceptable and desirable behaviours will further develop a safe and respectable schooling and environment for all students. It's important to keep researching when it comes to the gender identity and changing discourse surrounding gender issues in our schools. The Safe School Coalition has various resources that can help with understanding gender and how to ensure a post-structural perspective is embraced. Gender is not uniform and it's continuing to produce competing discourses on the topic. Teachers should be prepared, take the chance to engage in professional development opportunities and get involved in promoting gender diversity and challenge the stereotypical views the school community may already have. The curriculum is not the only content that our students take away from their schooling. If teachers can consider gender and how the development of gender is influenced by the school, bullying and domestic violence could be lowered. Supporting students in developing a positive gender can reduce violence, name-calling, and increase acceptance and love throughout the community. It is all of us that are responsible for gender socialisation and therefore conceptualisation of solutions to domestic violence and bullying in our schools.